Okay, so has everybody finished writing down? You didn't have to write every bit of this word for word. You could easily shorten it. You know, like summary, why it's a good book, statement, setting, plot, main character, theme or meaning, writing style, recommendation. If you want to shorten it, you could use a few other words. But raise your hand if you finished writing down. You've written down the ideas here. Has anybody written down 1 through 8? Okay, you can have some more time.
Just write down that you don't need to write it word for word, just you know. It's about 1 more minute, do the best you can.
And by the way, I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I just realized I won't do like the whole big introduction, but my name's Adora Spitak, and if you're wondering why I'm talking to you, I'm a published author. I've written 2 books, Flying Fingers and Dancing Fingers, so I love reading and writing literature. I hope it can be considered literature, and also teaching response to literature is really interesting because I get to hear ideas about what your favorite books are and why they're your favorite books, and go look through your recommendations. So, is anybody finished? Ready?
Not finished now. We're good.
Well, if you're not finished, just quickly wrap it up. Write like single words: main character, theme, meaning, writing style, recommendation. That usually works. And you can also, if your partner's finished writing, also look at this. Okay, well, we're going to move on. I'm leaving this up here so you can continue taking notes from it. But I want to talk a little bit more about the introductory paragraph. So have you ever read something, maybe a book, and the beginning was just so boring that you were like, oh, I really can't read this anymore, and sort of pushed it away? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Yes. Some raise hands. Yeah, one time there's a really good book by Charles Dickens called Tale of Two Cities, and it is a really awesome book, but you have to get through a couple of pages at the beginning, actually really a couple of chapters where you might not get what's going on, and where you really have to start piecing things together, and then in the middle of the book it starts getting super exciting. So a lot of books, especially ones that you read from a long time ago, they might seem like that. Oh, they're kind of boring, but really, a lot of them can be quite interesting. But when an introduction to something really turns you off immediately and you don't want to read it, that's generally not too good of a thing, because what will happen is then you have a certain percentage of people who say, you know, this is way too boring, I'm not going to keep going through it, so only a few people will be able to read your entire response literature, even if it's really interesting. So you want to make sure that your introduction is very snappy, very interesting, and not too slow or tedious. So you don't have to describe every single detail about what the main character is wearing, or every little thing that happened in the book when you're summarizing. You want to give a very quick, interesting summary. So you want to list the name of the book you're writing about. You don't want to leave out the title, the name of the book's author, and a brief description of the story. So maybe like 2 or 3 sentences. If you can get, and I'm very impressed if you can get a big book down into that little, but it shouldn't be too hard for books that are, 100 pages, 150 pages, and have just one main conflict. So you want to start with a hook. Does anyone know what the job of the hook is? We talked a bit about this earlier.
What is the job of a hook when you're writing?
To get someone to read it?
To get them to read it, exactly. A hook draws somebody in. If you think about like fishing, then the fish are drawn in by bait. Well, a hook works to grab your reader and kind of draw them in to your writing. It makes them want to keep in. So you could, in order to hook your reader, you could do, here are a few options. You could ask a rhetorical question. So does anyone know what a rhetorical question is?
A question that cannot answer.
A piece of paper that's, a question that's not designed to be answered. Very good. Yeah, a rhetorical question is asked for effect. That means that when you ask a rhetorical question, you're not expecting, because it would be a little hard for your reader reading your piece of paper to call you up and tell you yes, yes, no, yes, you know, in response to your yes, no questions or your imagine, would you like to do that? So you have to write these rhetorical questions to just get the reader thinking. It's like if I hold up this pen and I say, Sharpie pen, what is your purpose in life? Do I expect that to be answered? No, because there's no way that the pen can get back to me on that. So, asking a rhetorical question, though, will be something that you want to make sure gets your readers thinking, draws them in. It's an interesting question. Another option that you have is describing a scenario. So, does anyone know what describing a scenario is?
What is describing a scenario? Scenario, what word is scenario? What's the root word?
Well,
The word? Theme. Okay, so what would a scenario be? Or the story?
a scenario, sorry.
Go ahead.
A scenario at the beginning of your response literature, or at the beginning of an essay, there's a few different ways you could use it. A scenario basically takes your reader and drops them right into the middle of this imaginary scene. So, for instance, if I were trying to convince people to brush their teeth. Imagine if dentists checked your teeth every single day, and for every day that you had yellow teeth, they would fine you $100. While that might not be the initiative I'm proposing, I do think that, and go on with your convincing about why people should brush their teeth or something. So that's, kind of a not too interesting scenario, but scenarios are meant to get people really interested, to say, whoa, that sounds like a really weird thing to be in. So, for instance, you might take a scenario from one of the stories or something similar. So what's a really funny scenario from Captain Underpants?
Go ahead and share with your partner a funny scenario that you have read in Captain Underpants. For those of you that have read or seen the movie.
So I'm going to quickly start a new Word document. We can write up.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Who would like to share a funny scenario? Except for Anne, or Flavia, or Zach. They're the only ones who can really participate. Justina, thank you. You have a scenario to share? A funny scene? Samuel, go ahead.
When those two kids make a comic book,
Okay, so two kids make a comic book. Now by the way, about Captain Underpants, it's been maybe like 3 years since, maybe even more. I can't remember when I started reading Captain Underpants exactly, but tell me quickly, what is the idea behind Captain Underpants? What is Captain Underpants doing?
the principal's a superhero.
Okay, so the principal is a superhero, and why is he called Captain Underpants?
Because he's wearing underpants when he becomes a captain.
Okay, so, and is the way he transforms into a superhero is like just wearing his underpants essentially?
Yeah, he's wearing underwear.
Okay, so
cape.
here's a scenario. The scenario doesn't necessarily have to be like a scene or a conflict right out of the story. You could just say to your reader something like this. Imagine if you magically turned into a superhero every time you simply wore your underpants. Okay, or something like that. You could get more into details about the process, but and so people think, whoa, that would be weird, like just wearing my underpants and being a superhero. So you get people thinking that would be kind of interesting and imagining themselves like that and being a superhero. So by asking a question or starting with a scenario, you get people to think. So for the Chronicles of Narnia, I might do something like, imagine if walking through an old coat closet led you to a magical world filled with danger and adventure. Okay? Because that's what happens in Chronicles of Narnia. Is this character Lucy walks through a closet and suddenly she's in Narnia, this whole different world that has all with the White Witch and all kinds of these weird animals and people. And yeah, so that would be an interesting scenario. So by starting with a scenario, you kind of do two things at once. You get the reader thinking, you hook them in, but you also tell a little bit about what happens in the book. Captain Underpants, you turn into a superhero every time you just wear your underpants. Chronicles of Narnia, they found Narnia by walking through a closet, and so they got back as well. So by starting with a scenario that has to do with the book, then you at the same time tell your reader a little bit about the book. And then you could go on and have a summary. Like, well, that's what happens in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or that's what happens in Captain Underpants. So start with your hook, go on to summarize the book in case the readers haven't read the book before, and then you want to go on and give your reasons for liking the book by talking about the plot, the main character, the setting, the way the writer writes. So these are all the different aspects of books that might make you like or dislike a book. So we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to quickly go through some of the things that we talked about as review. Sorry. Okay, over here. So we talked about summarizing the plot, telling you when to attend the book, telling you where and when the book is set. Fairly straightforward. You don't need to do a whole lot of work. Just say you said it. What you like or don't like about the plot. You want to give a few things. Don't just say the plot is good. The plot is interesting. The plot, you want to expand. Be specific. The plot is suspenseful. It keeps me on my toes. I was flipping pages until midnight, even though I wasn't supposed to be reading that late. The plot was suspenseful because, and go on and give reasons why it was so exciting or why it was so, whatever word you were thinking. Tell the reader about the main character. So what do you know about the main character? We talked about Greg Heffley's strengths, weaknesses, how those strengths or weaknesses make you relate to the character. Do you think that the character is realistic? Are they someone that you might be friends with in real life? If so, you could talk about that. You know, this character really made me feel like I was reading about a friend or reading about someone I knew. Describe the book's theme or meaning. This one was a little challenging because we didn't talk about it much. Describing the book's theme or meaning. So, for instance, if like the Chronicles of Narnia might be about overcoming evil, like good versus evil, or Harry Potter, good versus evil, all those kinds of things. Themes, sometimes books will have multiple themes. So you think about like major ones, talk about that theme or meaning. If it's, for instance, if you're reading a story that has like a moral message or you learn something from it, you might say that as well. Describe the writer's writing style. So what is the writing style in Judy Moody?
Okay. Jordan, we have the next class.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I didn't realize how much overtime. Well, thank you so very much. Just remember to think about your response to literature, how you would, and think of it much like telling your friend about a favorite book. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.